Hello and welcome to another episode of So Fly. It's the end of October. My name is Mitch. We've got Gab here.
Hey, everyone.
And we've got Yilma.
Hey, everyone.
And today we're recording a super special episode. We've been excited to record for a while now. We're extremely lucky to have a fly fishing legend on the show, an ambassador for Rio, one of the greatest companies, and an absolute spay master, Simon Gawesworth. How's it going?
Well, with that intro, geez, I need to pay you a few $100.
Thank you so much for coming on the
nonsense. Show. Yeah, I mean, I'm just sitting here. Otherwise, I'll be fishing, and so this is better than fishing, right?
Yeah, true. Yeah. So I guess we're gonna jump into it. We're gonna talk a little bit about where you started fishing, and we're gonna talk about line design and also space stuff. But yeah, first, it's like I said, it's the end of October, and we've been wanting to record the show for a little while now, and it comes at a perfect time because it's actually steelhead season here in Ontario. We're all in Toronto right now, and steelhead season's just kicking off.
Nice.
Yeah, Great Lakes steelhead, so we're all pretty excited.
Yep, it's Pacific Northwest steelhead too. Columbia tributaries, anyway, particularly the Olympic Peninsula rivers are a bit devoid of fish at the moment, but there's a few around here as well, so it's a good time, as you say.
Oh no, it's wicked. That's amazing. Yeah, I imagine that West is starting to kick off, so that's exciting. So let's just start with how did you get into the sport, and can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your fly fishing path so far?
Well, that's pretty easy. My dad's fault, totally. He introduced me to this fly fishing sport back in '72, I think it was. He started a fly fishing school, so he was a fly fishing instructor. He had a school in England, and that was his job, was teaching people to fly fish. And I guess when he discovered that I showed some interest in fly fishing at 8, he said, "Here, son, here's a fly rod. I'm going to teach you how to fly fish." And so he did. So we actually had a pond in our back garden, well, more of a lake, I guess, a half-acre sort of pond, lake, whatever size you'd call that. Full of, well, originally, long story, but it had newts in it, and then we had goldfish in it, and then we had trout in it. And once we got trout in it, he said, this is a great chance. You got trout in your back garden. Go out and catch them on your fly. So that's how I started.
That's amazing. Wow, you guys had a pond in your backyard. That's so awesome.
Yeah. He before he started teaching fly fishing, he commercially sold goldfish out of this pond. Hardy, British-bred goldfish. None of these Chinese things that died apparently the moment they had a whiff of cold air.
Yeah.
So he was selling. So he was selling these outdoor-bred goldfish, and wow. He was paying my sister and myself one penny. A goldfish to catch when we were like 6 years old. So we'd catch them on bread. And I guess we went on strike because I think he was selling them for about £1 each. So he was making like this huge markup. And my sister and I said, well, we want 2p a fish. And he wouldn't have it. So he just netted the entire lot, sold them to some commercial goldfish pond, and stuck in trout.
Yeah.
And there we go.
That's amazing. Oh my God. So when you started fishing on it, was it an immediate love for fly fishing, or like how did that start?
With fly fishing?
Yeah, with fly fishing, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was an immediate love. I mean, I can't remember. I know that I loved going out and catching fish and casting, and I'm pretty certain I loved it at the age of 8 when I started fly fishing from the get-go. I can't recall having a tantrum and saying, I don't want to do this.
Yeah. But fishing for goldfish.
So I guess, yeah.
Fishing for goldfish would have been an interesting
thing. Well, that was just bread paste, you know. I'd get my schoolmates to come round after school and would have fishing competitions, and I would keep all their goldfish and sell them to my dad for £1 each.
Does the goldfish get pretty big?
They were all around a sort of a 4 to 6, 8-inch size, I guess, up to about 8 inches. So yeah, pretty decent size. Not these little 2-inch, 1-inch goldfish things from the fair.
Oh, that's awesome. So where did you go from there then? I guess you started fishing on the pond, and then how did sort of your love for fly fishing progress from there?
Well, we moved. So he started that school in '72, and it was pretty successful. And where we were living at the time, which is kind of the home counties of England, towards the London area, there's only lakes. And so when my dad wanted to expand the school, he decided to move to what's called the West Country in England. It's the far southwest peninsula, a county called Devon. And in Devon, you've got a lot of rivers there. So you had the option of adding river trout and sea trout and salmon to what he could offer as an instructor. And so he moved from these day lesson type plans where people would drive over from London for these lessons to a remote area of England where people would stay. And he bought a big Georgian house, and people stayed in the Georgian house, and he'd offer these 3 and 5 and 7 day courses on fly fishing. And so it became a much more of an intense introduction, if you like, into fly fishing, because there was fly fishermen all around 7 days a week, and there was trout and rivers to catch, and sea trout and salmon to catch. And so it was just a natural progression for me. I still enjoyed it, so it was just a natural progression for me to go out and indulge in trying to catch all these other species.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and so when did you get into fly, like being in fly championships and actually fishing competitively?
Well, I guess I was about 14. I think there was do you know what a gymkhana is? Have you ever heard of, you know what gymkhanas are? Do you have those in Canada?
No.
No. Okay, so there was a gymkhana. It's kind of a country fair, mostly horse orientated.
Okay.
For just kind of outdoor people. There was a gymkhana country fair type thing in Devon where we lived, and my dad took us along, and there was a fly casting competition there. And I entered it. He said, "Oh, you should enter this thing, son." And I entered this casting competition, and somehow I won it. And the prize was a bottle of whiskey.
Awesome.
My dad wouldn't let me keep that at 14. So he traded that for a brand new fly rod, a carbon fiber fly rod. So it was my first carbon fiber fly rod was my prize, and he kept the whiskey. So that's how I got into it. And funnily enough, the guy who was running it, coincidentally, he was the father of the current British casting champion.
Wow.
And the father's name was Howard Tonkin, and the son was Alan Tonkin. And Howard said, "Oh, this guy could do pretty good if we give him some tournament casting pointers." So he kind of helped out and taught my dad and taught me, and that was really how I got into competition casting.
Oh, right on. That's really cool. Yeah, I remember watching your. So I learned to spay fish probably about 10 years ago now, and I remember watching your some of your Rio videos on how to spay cast. Obviously, yeah, spay fishing over the years obviously has become really popular. When did you get into spay casting and spay fishing?
Well, that's kind of part of it being a Brit. I mean, that's everyone in Britain. If you go salmon fishing, you spay fish, and you use a two-handed salmon rod or spay rod, and you make spay casts. That just goes with the territory, has since the 1800s. So, my mum and dad separated when I was, 4 or 5 or something. My mum moved up to Scotland, where she's from, and she bought a house with her, my stepfather, in Granton-on-Spey, which is there on the Spey. And so I would go out for summer holidays, of course, and fish, and you just fish a two-handed 15-foot salmon rod and you make spay casts. So that was just part of going up to Scotland and fishing there. And with my dad's fly fishing school, it was an important part of teaching. We taught people how to spay cast. So again, he kind of embraced the spay casting game and got into that and developed spay casting techniques and tuitional techniques.
Do you have your own sort of Simon Gawesworth technique at all? Like, is there
No.
Did you develop anything that's unique to you?
Bits and pieces. I mean, everybody has a style, and when I was learning to teach and learning to cast, I was like most kids are that age, and that kind of mentality is that your way is the only way. So I would try and teach people my way and say, hey, you're doing it the wrong way. Your left hand's up, your right hand's up, your thumb's sticking out, your whatever it was. And you soon learn that you're a fool to try and teach people the way. You have to understand that there's the physics of the cast, and that's what you pass it on. So my dad came up with spay casting was a relatively new instructional area, I guess, in the 70s and early 80s when he was teaching spay casting. So he developed a bunch of terminologies that he used to teach, and I used because he taught me. And so things like that have come into class. And then when I got really interested in spay casting, I started trying to analyze spay casting and trying to come up with, like any instructor, I guess, when you're an instructor, you try and find better ways to teach. So I try and find metaphors or terminologies or something that makes it easier for people to learn. So of course I've come up with my own things, and like everybody else has.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think that's great advice, especially for us, because Mitch and Aldo do instruct at times for the beginners, and to develop like a fundamentals versus this is how you should do it is definitely like a great way of great advice for teaching for sure.
Yeah, because hard to do when you're a youngster. You don't realize that.
Yeah, exactly. Because I'm still awkward caster, but man, do I let that thing fly.
What do you think? What do you think it takes to make like a good teacher? Like when it comes to casting.
I think. Well, obviously you got to have patience. My dad actually had. So one of the early things he taught me when. So my life, when I left school at 16, I was going to be an Air Force pilot, and then my dad said, hey, you could go to school for another 5 years, or you can teach fly fishing with me, and I'll hire you. So there was no brainer. So one of the first bits of advice he gave me, he said, there's no such thing as a stupid student as a stupid instructor. And so he made me think that, well, that's pretty good advice. There's always a way to teach somebody something. And if it doesn't work one way with an analogy, then you try a different way. You try hands-on, you try video, you try descriptive, you try different ways of teaching. So I think the most valuable advice is to understand that you're the idiot if you can't teach, not the person.
Yeah.
And so that was a good thing. You've got to have patience, of course, because there are some people who are very slow to learn and don't learn the way you teach, and so you have to have patience with these people. And I think you've got to be proud. You've got to be proud to be a teacher, not just consider it, I'm getting paid for this, so okay, he's making some bad casts, I'll just let it fly because my lesson ends in half an hour, and that's fine. You've got to be proud to teach and proud of the results you get.
Yeah, absolutely. That's an amazing way to put it, for sure. Yeah, teaching can often be hard. Like, do you ever remember a time where someone just didn't get it? Like, have you ever kind of gotten frustrated with it, or?
Oh, yeah, of course. As again, mostly as a kid, when I didn't have patience and I didn't understand there was different ways to teach. So I think I've matured a bit more, and I've got to a point, I believe, where I don't get frustrated. I can compartmentalize people, so I know that there is some guy I'm teaching who is never going to make 130-foot casts, and nor does he want to. That's fine. I can embrace that. Yeah. My job is to make him fishable and enjoy the game of casting, and see that casting is more than just a way of getting a fly to a fish. And so I can have different expectations of people now. And I think that I didn't in the past. Of course, in the past I would obviously get frustrated and drink plenty of alcohol as a result.
Yeah, for sure. So you started working for your dad, and you were teaching, and you were doing those things. How did you end up getting working with Rio?
Oh, life's got these paths. Obviously, it's opportunities. Sometimes you're lucky enough to take the right opportunity, and sometimes you're not. I guess and these paths I think they're opened by people you meet. I mean, I had taught. To keep it very simple, I taught a guy a long time ago in the 80s. His name is Bo. And I taught this chap called Bo to spay cast. And Bo was fishing coincidentally a couple of years later on the Dean in BC with Jim. Jim was fishing at the time. He didn't have Rio. And Bo was doing these spay casts. And Jim said, hey, what's that? That's pretty cool. I want to learn that thing. And where'd you learn? And Bo said, I learned from this Englishman called Simon. And so Jim got in touch with me. We conversed for a little bit. He wanted to get into spay casting, so we kind of just conversed about spay casting in the old days of snail mail, of course, and a few phone conversations. And then in '95, I went out to fish in BC. I was hosting a trip for a British company, and I went out a week early and just fished with Jim. And he and I hit it off, and we spay cast. And at the end of that, we kind of agreed to do dual classes. So he would put together groups of classes. He had just started Rio by then, so he put together some classes through various fly shops that worked with him, and would hire me to come over and teach those classes with him. And it kind of worked out, and he got to a point where he said, if you ever need a real job, then just let me know, because I'd love to have you working for Rio. So when I got to the point where I wanted a real job, which is when I got married, and my wife said, you can't spend 4 months of your life in Argentina guiding every year. You got to get a proper job. So I contacted Jim, and he said, yeah, absolutely, offer still stands, come on out. So I did.
That's awesome. That's such a cool way to start. How did you? So when you started at Rio, what were you doing other than you were teaching and things like that? But what else were you working on?
I think that was a good question. Jim has a knack of finding people that I think and encouraging people to. That's a good question. To be a jack of all trades, but to help the company. I mean, when I started with Rio, I mostly did the shows, and his concept and thought process was if you can get a good caster to do casting demonstrations, I guess people associate that with the brand, and you mentioned the brand. So I was doing a lot of the shows and doing casting demonstrations and standing on there talking about the products, and started off with some early marketing things there, talking about how the lines would work. I mean, I had an understanding of gear and casting, and so that contributed. And Jim, I didn't know anything about gear design, and so Jim, over the course of a couple of years, evolved me into designing some fly lines for Rio and casting lines, and so kind of evolved through that, through marketing and line design and shows and demonstrations and talks, club talks, things like that.
Oh, that's awesome. So at that time, was Rio considered to be like an innovative company in the fly fishing world?
Fairly. I mean, I moved over initially in 1999, and by that time, Jim had built a fly line factory. Pre 96, all the Rio fly lines were made by Cortland to Jim's design, and then in 96, he decided to bite the bullet and just make his own lines because he couldn't get what he wanted from Cortland, or he couldn't get priority, obviously, because Cortland were making their own lines. So he decided to make his own fly lines. And so by the time I joined him, he was already making fly lines. And so that was nice that we had a factory there. We could churn out some fly lines and make a few taper tweaks and cast them and see if they were diabolical or they worked, and learn that way.
Yeah, that's amazing. Like, I love the idea of just like making my own fly line, because there's just nothing that's like working for me in the market.
Yeah, don't we all?
Yeah, it's such a bold thing to do. So I guess, have you seen have you seen fly lines sort of change over the years? Like, what have been some of those big innovations or some of those big changes to fly lines since you started?
Well, the biggest change, I guess, so how Rio got into fly lines into shops was making what a lot of spey anglers know of is a line called the wind cutter. So the wind cutter was the first line designed for spey casting, and before the wind cutter it was all double tapers, and those are hard, and so spey was just becoming a conversational piece, and so Rio got into fly shops by having this wind cutter line, and then Jim's entrepreneurial ideas and skill and innovation decided that, well, if it works for spey lines, let's make a couple of different trout fly lines. So we made a wind cutter trout line, and it was different from your regular weight forward, and it had what's called a compound taper. And the compound taper is really a taper that I would guess made things change in the fly line world, the ability to make compound tapers. And compound tapers are just multiple steps. It's very hard to describe without an image, but a regular weight forward is a line that's got if you start at the leader end, it's got a front taper, then it's got a level fat section, then it's got a back taper, and then it's the running line. So that's your original weight forward. And compound tapers were the first changes in line where you could take that level fat section and add a fat bit to that level section or a thin bit to that level section and create multiple different weight sections within a fly line, and that would influence the line design. That would influence the shape of the line and the end result of the line. And nobody really thought about that before. And so really that was Jim's philosophy, to create these more niche-y lines. And I think that's where it came in. And a lot of that came about through the fly line machinery developing from, again, without imagery and videos and pictures, hard to describe, but fly line tapers were controlled in the early days of PVC through rotating cams. And these cams would rotate. They had a V notch in them, and these cams would rotate to a diameter you wanted the fly line to be, and the V notch would be that diameter, and the fly line would run through that and create a taper. And you could never create sophisticated tapers with it. But anyway, long story short, nowadays tapers are controlled by a variable die, a variable orifice that can make, in an inch, you can make something like 5,000 changes in an inch now. So they're very technical.
Yeah. One of my favorite things, I think, is I know it's a simple thing, but just having those color gradients that show you where the sections of the tapers are in your fly line, like especially with Spey.
Yeah, that's been great, right?
Oh, it's so handy to have those little cues of where you should have your line in your rod to load it properly and all that stuff. But like with that stuff in mind, yeah, it's like what steps I guess go into designing a line. How do you go about making a new line?
Well, that's a good point. So, that's now become the norm in fly lines. It's very hard. If I look at any fly line these days, it's a single color. I look at it and go, A, I don't like the look of it. It doesn't appeal to me. And B, I've got used to using the color changes for head length and loading and stuff like that. I think a lot of people have. So that was an evolution in fly line manufacturing processes, the ability to use multiple colors of dye, basically PVC, to create multiple color lines. So that was a good step. And that really started developing probably in the very early 2000s. That came into fly line being, whether it was made by Rio Cortland, Scientific Anglers, all the line companies started to evolve down that route of multiple color fly lines. And so, yeah, that was probably a good change. 2000, I remember when we came out with the Rio Grande, it was the first specialty fly line we came out with that actually fly shops and consumers bought. It was a very good selling line from day one, and that was 2001. And that was just a green color line, and we added a yellow color to it maybe 2 or 3 years later when we started experimenting with these 2 color fly lines.
Yeah,
it's still a really good seller. Aldo and I worked at the fly shop Drift in downtown Toronto, and the Rio Grande is still like a line that's sell on a regular basis.
Yeah, you're right. The Grand is still a very popular line. it's in a well-established position. People talk about the Grand, and it's a very easy casting taper. It's a whole line size heavy, so it casts well. It's an easy loader, so it's a great no nonsense fly line, and it still is. And we can't drop it because it still sells. It's still our probably 3rd best-selling line.
What's the first and the second? Just to be curious.
In the trout world, the Rio Gold is by hands down our best-selling line. And then that's a good question. What would be our second best-selling line? I don't have the numbers. I would have to say our second best-selling trout line, which would be the trout category, is massively bigger than saltwater and Spey. Say most of the lines you sell in the world, we sell worldwide, 75% of those are trout lines. So you're never going to create a Spey line or a saltwater line that's going to get close to touching trout line sales. So they're going to all be trout lines, the top 3. Gold, Grand, Trout LT, probably the 3, and I'm not sure which order the second and third would be in.
That's interesting. So how do you? So I guess the color gradients on the lines to show the different tapers, it comes from a sort of just a need to sort of have a little better indication on the water. But when you're deciding to make a new line, like what are some of the things you guys first consider?
That's a long process.
Yeah, no, I imagine.
A long answer. Yeah, simply if you're designing a brand new line for something, obviously somebody has come up with this request for a line. Let's take, for example, the lines we come up with this year. So we've come up with a whole bunch of jungle lines for the tropics. So let's use those as an example and run through the process of that. We were starting to get lots of requests for lines to take down to fish for Dorado and peacock bass and stuff like that. So the first thing is you analyze the environment. It gives you an idea of what do we need, a tropical line, do we need a cold water line? Down there in the jungle, you need a tropical line, so you don't want a line that's going to be limp and sticky. So first thing we knew is we'd have to have a certain type of core and a certain type of coating to create that. And then our head of design, Marlon, went down on a couple of trips to fish there and experience the fishery and see what kind of flies are being cast down there, what kind of distance you're casting. Are you fishing from a boat? Are you wade fishing? And so that sets up the parameters of the tapers of the line. Casting big flies means you need a heavier line than normal. So if it's an 8-weight rod, you actually want to create a line that's probably a 9 or a 9.5 in terms of weight. So there's mass in the line to cast the big flies. That particular fishery required short front tapers because you're fishing again some fairly large flies. So it sets the parameters of your tapers. If you're fishing on a river, you might need to throw a mend in there. So maybe that means you need to have a longer back taper and a longer head to facilitate throwing a mend. So there's parameters that are set to create the end result of a fly line, and it basically is experimenting with going to these fisheries and targeting the species and putting all these parameters down in notes and just saying, well, here's what we need, and then making samples, taking them down, fishing them, and once you've dialed in the formulas and the coatings and the cores and the tapers, and the last thing you start to do is dial in the colors. What's a good color that does it need to be a camo color that the fish can't see? Does it need to be a bright color because you're targeting, you want to see your cast, and therefore you need to see a fly line? So it's just kind of trial and error. It's called product testing. It's the best part of my job.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like the best part.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Well, with all that innovation, I guess too, and Rio's been a real leader in that over the last, several years. I would probably say over a decade. What do you think's next in the world of line innovation? Like, is it a matter of just continuing to push the boundaries?
It is. I mean, the R&D team, of course, are constantly striving to create new core materials, new chemistry for plastics, new floating materials that make lines float higher, new durable things that can make lines longer. So I think we've not exhausted, because there's always going to be fisheries like jungle fishing has become a thing. Redfish in the Gulf became a big thing 3 to 4 years ago, maybe something like that. So that fishery started to get really popular, so we developed winter redfish lines. Now the jungle thing is becoming popular, so we developed the jungle lines. So gradually, fisheries evolve, and people target these fisheries, and so we need product to fish for these fisheries. So design-wise, there's not a lot that can change in design-wise, because you're pretty limited to a short front taper, a mid-long length front taper, a long front taper. You're limited to a short back taper, a mid back taper, a long back taper. You're limited to certain things within the design. So fisheries will evolve and create new fly lines, but where the real innovation is going to be is when new chemistry comes in with new cores and new coatings and new, as I said, longer lasting lines or slicker lines or higher floating lines. And that's just a chemistry thing that the R&D team are playing around with.
So since being at Rio, do you have any projects that really stand out to you as like a memorable, fun one that you just absolutely loved?
Oh, I love fly fishing and I love fly casting, so I'll take it all.
Yeah,
I'll do anything else and go and cast a fly line and go and test fly lines. I mean, nothing particularly stands out. I've loved my part in developing all the lines we do. We've got a really, really good team these days of passionate fly fishermen that do the designs. I don't do much of the designs anymore. I still do majority of the spay designs, but single-handed stuff for the rest of the team. And we usually go together as a group and go down to, like last December, we went down to Louisiana to test some new prototypes of some redfish lines, and that's great. I mean, I love those things. A group of 6 of us just went down and spent a week targeting big redfish. So that part, I guess, is good, just to fish with the lads and go out and fish and
targeting big redfish. How was that? How'd you guys do?
It was epic. Yeah. It was stupid.
Sounds amazing.
We had one day where, I mean, most of the days are your typical days. We just had one day where everything was right and the wind dropped back, and Chris, our new R&D guy, and I just hit it right. We had 17 reds in that day landed in the boat, and one was 6 pounds. The other 16 were all over 24 pounds.
What?
And then we had 5 over 30.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Yeah, all sight fishing to reds, so it was pretty epic.
Yeah, seriously.
So you guys traveled the world testing all those lines, where is the next frontier? Because now you guys are developing jungle fly fishing, but what's next after that?
It's a good question. It's we try and not invent a frontier so we can go there and test lines. It's coming in very tempting. Oh, let's go and I think tiger fish are going to be really big. Let's go down to South Africa and spend some time on the Zambezi, Zimbabwe, and Zambia, and things like that. We try and rein that in, and because I don't think the bosses would be happy if we created a fly line, spent 20 grand testing it, and sold 3 samples.
Yeah.
It gotta be strategic.
So Yeah, and then we do quite a bit with our regional or our national regional, if you like, whatever you like to call it, distributors. So, for example, using tigerfish as an example, I did go to South Africa last year into the country of Zambia and fished for 4 days down there, and that was to work with our distributor in South Africa. They wanted tigerfish lines, so it's not a product we come out with in Rio and you can buy in US or Canada, but our South African distributor said, look, we really need some lines for tigerfish. This is a big fishery for us. Can you come down and put some time in it and tell us what we need to do? So that's another product development, but it doesn't come out as a Rio product worldwide. It's a Rio product in South Africa. But so I don't know where the next frontier is.
Yeah. Jungle fishing is interesting. Have you ever done any jungle fishing?
No, I've never done it. No, that's we had a lucky sod called Marlin who went down and did all that product testing. That fell on his plate, and off he went.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Did those trips is high on my list, though.
Oh man, yeah, they look amazing. Like the fish down there.
Yeah,
it's just crazy.
Yep, they are that.
So switching gears and talking a little bit more about spay fishing. So obviously you've seen spay sort of grow over the years. I think like you said, when you started spay fishing, it was just like a natural thing to pick up at the time because it was, it's what you guys did over there in England. But how have you seen spay fishing grow over the years?
Well, I mean, European-wise, I don't think it has. I think if you look in the US and Canada and places, Argentina, Australia, places that are really foreign to spay, the biggest evolution in spay came when rods became and were developed for specific fisheries. In the early days when I came out here, a spay rod, salmon rod as we would call them, were 14-foot 9 weights, 15-foot 10 weights, 16-foot 11 weights. And there was no wonder these rods never got popular and this style of fishing never got popular in the US and Canada because there's not a fishery that those rods are going to work in. So people would look at them and say, I don't need that, and therefore I don't need spay casting. And so once rod manufacturers started to create 12-foot 8 weights and 11-foot 7 weights and switch rods and stuff like that, then there became a rod for the species and the size of the fisheries that are in US and Canada, and people started to buy them. And so those were really the big changes when gear started to be more tailored to the fisheries that are available in America and in Canada. And of course then people started going, oh, okay, I can use these rods, and oh, this is quite a fun way of casting and fishing, and so they would start to buy them, and that's really where the I think spay really got its first foothold, and then fly lines got shorter and heavier and easier to cast, and suddenly spay casting didn't require 2 or 3 weeks of steady instruction and 3 or 4 years of hard practice to become a decent spay caster, which it was in the early days when it was double tapers. Lines became short and very easy to cast, and so suddenly people can make spay casts. And then it became a fashion, I guess. It became a buzz. So everybody talks about it, and therefore everybody gets into it, and not everybody, but in terms of compared to in the early days.
Yeah.
No, for sure. And then in terms of like just fly fishing in general, have you seen fly fishing, the sport of fly fishing, change over the years?
Well, I have, yes, absolutely, and not. I don't know if it's a good way or a bad way. The problem comes from we as a line company, like all line companies, try and develop a fly line that is going to sell a lot. And these days, the lines that sell the most are the easiest casting fly lines that you can make. So our Rio Grandes and Rio Golds, which are front-loaded, slightly heavier lines, they're selling far more lines than in the early days because they are much easier to cast. So a lot more fly fishermen can, kind of like the spay example, can pick up a fly rod and go to a free fly casting class in their local fly shop in an evening and have 2 or 3 hours over a course of maybe a couple of weeks on their local football fields and cast a line and go, oh, this isn't too hard. And so I'm going to take it up because fly casting is not that hard. So because gears become, fly lines particularly, rods also, of course, become much more responsive, much lighter, much easier to cast. So the gear has become much easier to perform the act of fly casting, and therefore more people have got into it because of the performance of that.
Yeah, for sure. No, it's interesting to see how it's changed, in that respect. What about you've traveled all over, as Gab was saying. Do you have what's your favorite freshwater to fish in the world?
I mean, anytime people ask me that, I always say the Dean, just cause.
Yeah.
I love the Dean.
Yeah.
I mean, I do. I wouldn't say the steelhead's necessarily my favorite species in the world. I mean, I love steelhead. I just don't have a favorite. I love it. I love them all, but I love the Dean. I love the aggression of the fish in the Dean.
Yeah.
I've been going to Alaska the last couple of summers, and I've had an absolute brilliant time catching huge kings in Alaska up in the Connecticut. I think that's an incredible fishery, swinging for kings and just getting 30, 35-pound fish that fight and run hundreds and hundreds of yards and jump like crazy. So that's another one I put up there. But then again, I just love I love the Henry's Fork for fishing for technical trout with a dry fly. I love the Missouri for fishing streamers to the bank in the fall. I mean, I like fishing. As long as I'm making a technical cast. I got to say, I do like the technical aspect. I don't go to catch numbers of big fish. I go to try and find a technical aspect.
Right. So I
like that part.
When you approach a new water body, then what do you do when you get to a new river? Is there a lot of technical stuff that comes out for you?
Oh, no. I mean, I'm like any angler really who's semi-experienced. I'll go and look at it and try and read the water and see. I mean, if it's a trout fish, I'll try and see if there's fish rising. I would much rather fish dry flies or soft tackles than anything else, and those are fish a lot better when you have rising fish. So I'll try and find rising fish, of course, and then if not, then I'll look for a nice little riffle I can swing a soft tackle through. I'm a big fan of swinging soft tackles for trout, so there's a certain type of water that's good for that, which I'll try and look for trout. For steelhead, I'd love waking a dry fly or a muddler or a skater through, so I'm trying to find the right kind of water for that, the right kind of light for that, the evening light or morning light. So there's nothing technical about it. I'll just, like anybody, I'll just try and read the water and try and tailor in the pools and areas of water I fish through what I enjoy as a fisherman. I don't enjoy fishing nymphs and indicators. I hate it, and so I'm not going to go and find a seam. I will leave that to other people who love that and catch their own species of fish that way, and plenty of fish that way. So I'll find the water that just makes me happy.
Yeah, for sure. And now, do you ever go out with guides, or do you prefer to just kind of fish on your own and just figure it out yourself?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I go out with a lot of guides, and that's definitely one aspect, because you can learn so much from guides, and certainly in certain environments I do as much saltwater fishing I can, and I love saltwater fishing, and you need a guide because I don't have a boat and I don't know the water, so you have to have guides for that.
Yeah.
I love guides and gillies. If I go to Scotland, for example, for a river, I like going out with a gillie and him showing me the water and the pools. But I get my most kicks just whether I'm on a bonefish flat or a salmon river in Scotland or a steelhead river in BC. I much prefer to be left alone and try and fathom it out. I'll probably catch a lot less fish doing it, but I like that. I like the thought process that I've done something here. I wasn't told to do this. I did something and caught something as a result,
exactly.
or didn't.
Yeah, there's always some merit into doing it yourself and figuring it out yourself.
Yeah,
for sure.
Absolutely.
So in Scotland, just out of curiosity, what are some of your favorite places in Scotland to go fishing?
Oh, rivers. I mean, I've spent a lot of my life fishing lakes. You tend to do that when you live in England.
Yeah.
You fish a lot of lakes and reservoirs, but I've always preferred rivers. And if I'm river fishing in Scotland, and I like the game of casting a spey rod, so I try and find rivers in Scotland that I can fish a spey rod and do some spey casting for, and that generally means it's Atlantic salmon. So my mum lives up near the town of Perth in Scotland. That's on a river called the Tay, so I fish the Tay quite a bit. I still go up to the Spey. I think the Spey is all hallowed ground because, of course, it's just legend for the name of the cast comes from river, so everybody should fish the Spey. And there really isn't many rivers that are as beautiful as the lower 35 miles of the River Spey for fly water.
Yeah.
So I fish the Spey, the Tweed, the Tay, but then I love it. Some of the small little spate rivers, the West Coast spate rivers, or some of the tributaries of the Bewley and rivers, the Conan and the Carron, and some of the rivers that flow north up in Scotland there. So yeah, but I don't really mind.
We definitely, after talking to you, we definitely need to get in contact with Scotland's tourism industry.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Selfishly, I ask. I
Yeah.
might be making a trip out to Scotland actually in the spring, and so I'm just so curious, like where to go fishing there, because I've heard it's all private, kind of expensive water.
No, you've heard totally wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, some of it is, but it's evolved for the better, for the much better over the last probably 10 years. There's an incredible database website called FishPal.
Yeah.
And FishPal is, have you come across it?
No. What is it?
Oh, okay. When you said yeah, I thought you'd had. FishPal is just about the best resource you can have. You can't imagine a better way of finding fishing in Scotland, and it's starting to move to England and Wales and Ireland now. But basically, it's just a website, and you click on the region or the river you want to fish, and it lists a number of beats, and you can see what beats are available for certain times of year. You can see the catch records. You can book the fishing. You can book geely. You can book accommodation from it. You can see the price of it. So. It's in the old days you had to book everything years in advance and keep your slot, and if you lost your slot, then somebody else took it and they had the first choice. Now you can just book this stuff online. You can see the price, you can see the catch returns, you can find the beat, you can find the pools. It's a phenomenal resource, and if you're going to Scotland, you just go to fishpal.com or .co.uk. I can't remember which it is. And dig around, and you'll find out how easy it is.
Yeah, fishpal.com. I'm looking at it right now. It looks amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, it's super handy. Wow.
So, Mitch,
it is amazingly handy.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's still all private in the UK, and that's the difficult thing. You know, over here in the US, I love, and I've come accustomed to the fact that most rivers I can just go up and go down at a public access point and start fishing. And because you don't have that in the UK, it is intimidating to people who don't know the system in the UK, because if you go over without any planning and you find, I'm in Glasgow, let me go and fish a river over there. Let's go fish, say, for example, the River Leven. That's a nice little salmon river. How do I do that? I don't know how to do that. Well, and that's the difficulty of British fishing, is that it's very hard to do that on the day. But if you have a resource like this FishPal thing, and you can say, I'm going over next week, or I'm going over next April, and I'm going to be in Glasgow, and you look at the map of Glasgow and you see the rivers that are around there, and you say, okay, what's going to fish in April? And you look at April and you see, these haven't got anything in the last 50 years in April. This one has. So that resource has made it extraordinarily efficient for people now to go and fish, obviously, in places like that.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's amazing. So we do a little segment on the show, actually, that I think could be kind of fun right now, called, it's like the dumbest title ever. It's called Mitchie's Fishies 5. It's stupid. It rhymes with my name, kind of, so we kind of just run with it. But it's basically just five sort of questions about your fly fishing life, just sort of broader, passion type questions. So maybe we could talk about those a little bit.
Okay.
Cool. So this first question, and you've sort of talked a little bit about this already, but it's, what is your favorite fish and why?
Huh. Well, do we talk about it? Because I actually don't have an answer. I mean, right now I can't say, because first thing that leaps into my mind is a permit, and then maybe that's quickly replaced by a tarpon, and then I don't know, an Atlantic salmon up in the Spey in May, a Dean steelhead, a Connectoc king. I don't know. I don't have one.
So you like the strength. You like the fight.
I like the difficulty.
Yeah, exactly.
I way over anything else. So everything would be. I would hate to go to a pond full of stocked rainbows and haul in 20 fish in 20 casts. That's just. Even though I like rainbow, where if you get a rainbow trout in the Henry's Fork that's on the ranch there, and it's a technical feeder, and it's a 23-inch fish when there's 15 microcurrents between you and that, then a rainbow trout would come in because it's feeding on size 18 betas or something. But then you take that same trout and put it in a stocked pond where it's just eating pellets and it's going to glug down anything you throw it. Well, I would have no interest in the trout. So I don't think there's an answer to a species. I think it's the situation of the species.
Right, yeah. It's interesting, actually. It sort of actually just kind of it made me think of something else, too, just about saltwater fishing. Yeah, like you were saying, permit and tarpon are huge species for you. Where are some of your favorite places to go saltwater fishing?
Oh, my favorite's got to be Cuba.
Yeah.
Absolutely fantastic. What a unbelievable place that is, both in terms of the way you're treated as a person by the locals, and not the fishermen in particular, but just by the locals. They are wonderful people. But also because the island is basically the entire country of Cuba is a marine park and marine reserve, and so there's no commercial fishing, and in most of the places there's not even recreational fishing allowed. Most of the places there's a couple of companies that have worked with the Cuban government to preserve the fisheries and have licenses to take a limited number of anglers fishing, and so you go out there and you have these pristine flats that are pretty untouched. I mean, when I was down there in May last year, we had me and my partner, we had 10 square miles of flats to ourselves. There wasn't a single, nobody was fishing it. Nobody else fishes it. No commercial, no recreational, no natives, no locals. And so you have this incredible fishery. And so I think Cuba, I absolutely have loved fishing in Cuba.
Since you work in Washington, is it tough to get to Cuba if you kind of want to?
No. I mean, nowadays you can fly. I mean, I flew from Seattle to Atlanta, and Atlanta straight to Havana.
Oh, okay, very cool.
Simon, it's funny you say that about Cuba. I had the exact experience there. It is wonderful. It's like untapped resources. Like the mangroves, they just look so fresh, like bright green. It's like no one's been there before, and the locals are fantastic.
Exactly. It's not crisscrossed by prop tracks and ripped up by yahoos and ski. Water. What are the water ski-doo things called?
Sea-doos.
Yeah, jet skis.
Jet skis, yeah.
No, it's fabulous.
So if you could fish, I mean, this is an interesting little segue into it, but if you could fish anywhere in the world right now, where would you go and why?
Is it somewhere I haven't been to or somewhere I have been to?
Either one would be cool.
Right now, at this exact date, so I mean, if I said October now, like today's date, it wouldn't be. Yeah, I mean that limits it because not a lot of fisheries are going to be good at this time of year. But if I could just teleport myself to somewhere right now, it would probably, it'd probably be a permit flat somewhere. Or somewhere maybe back to Cuba again.
Yeah,
somewhere
nice
coffee.
And warm. Yeah. So for the third question, what is your best fishing memory? I know this is a big one. Like,
big one.
Dig deep. It's obviously a long fishing career you've had, probably tons of amazing memories and stories. But any unique ones that come to mind?
Well, I mean, there's always a few standout ones. Probably one that stands out the most at the moment, and that's because it's fairly recent, was my first big Chinook, big king I caught under the Connect Hawk last year. It was, I mean, I've caught kings for a long time in various Pacific Northwest rivers that are like the Dean, for example. They're kind of dogged, slow things, and this one being tide lice, fresh fish, was onto my backing 300 yards away, jumping and gone absolutely ballistic before I could even wade ashore. I mean, it was, and that was because this was one of the most gorgeous fish I've ever seen. Just bright, chrome bright, sea liced, very powerful, aggressive fish. That one sticks in my mind. But maybe that's because it's pretty recent. My first permit, God, that thing sticks in my mind. My first tarpon. I don't know. I think I enjoy all of it so much. If I just think about any day's fishing, it'll always have a highlight in there somewhere.
Yeah. Do you remember the story behind your first permit?
Yeah, I remember that. That was. When was that? That would be like 2009, maybe 99, 2000, 2001, down in the Keys. I was fishing with one of our Rio guys down there, and we were doing a gear testing trip, and we had this guide called Dale Perez, nicknamed Eagle Eyes. I think most guides are called that by everybody. But anyway, he was down there, and I just remember he'd seen this permit. Marlin had caught a fish, about 20-pound permit, and Dale had spotted the fish, and it was my turn, and he pulled like crazy against the wind because it was upwind of him, so he put in a ton of effort. And he's one of those shouting guides. He said, if you mess this cast up after all this work, he said, I am going to come down and take that rod off you and snap it. And he got kind of ready. Don't you dare mess this thing up. And I went, oh, great, thanks for the pressure. And somehow the cast landed right, and the fish turned round. And I remember that I'd missed a permit shot earlier because a permit was following my crab pattern, and when I was retrieving it, and when I'm trout fishing and a fish follows it and doesn't take it, I'll either speed up or stop. I'll do things like that. And so I did one or the other, and the permit bolted away, and the guy just ate me up, saying, you are an absolute spastic. What the hell are you doing that? You don't ever do that with permit. So anyway, having been shouted at and warned about being shouted at, I made the right cast and I was the right retrieve, and I hooked this permit and I landed this permit. It was it's still my biggest today. It was a 25-pound fish, so it was a decent sized permit.
That's a huge,
but no,
huge
it's clear
fish.
as day.
Yeah. That's amazing. What's it like? Like I've heard so many stories about permit, and they're tricky to find and catch. And what do they fight like? Like what's catching a permit feel like?
Oh, they're just hard fighting. I mean, a lot of people like permit because they are very, very difficult fish that will refuse you. Do everything right, and it'll still refuse you 99 times out of 100. So I think that's the love of permit. I mean, they're not. I don't think they're a particularly harder fighter than a tarpon. Again, depends on the size. You get a 15-pound tarpon and a 15-pound permit. The permit will drag it backwards. But if you get your average tarpon of say a 70-pound tarpon, they are brilliant fish because they jump. They're so acrobatic. Their suns are glistening on their silver scales. I mean, I love the fight of a tarpon too. I think the permit challenge is just the fact that it is so hard to catch that when you get one, you feel pretty good about it. You've done everything right.
Yeah, for sure. Tarpon, that's like, oh man.
I heard from many people, and even like online, I think the yelling part of a guide for permit seems to be kind of one of the characteristics.
Yeah.
They seem to be kind of like a hard ass kind of guide, eh?
Well, luckily I've fished with some really good guides that are just chill and relax about it, and put no pressure on you. The guides is like guides all over the world. Some days you're going to get people who are ticked off, and some days they're always going to be ticked off, and some days they're going to be relaxed. So I've had both aggressive guides and passive guides, and I got to say, a guide starts shouting at me, I don't take that too kindly. That's not how I don't like being shouted at. I'm trying my best, so piss off.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think I'd be a little bit like that too. Although he yells at me all the time, and I never take it.
It's different if he's a mate.
Yeah.
You have to take it.
Yes.
Do you remember the story behind your first tarpon? Actually, just like we've been talking a lot about tarpon over the last year, and we want to go catch tarpon so bad after hearing stories. Do you remember what it was like catching that first one?
Oh yeah, I mean that was. Again, it's like your first trout, your first salmon, your first steelhead, your first everything, first carp. I mean, I remember the first years of all. My first tarpon was actually quite a small one, about 15 pound, just a little guy caught in Belize. We met out there making some films, and a tarpon swam by, and I cast a tarpon fly to it, and I caught it, and that was my first tarpon. I'd say it wasn't a big one, it wasn't a great fight, but it was still just stunning. The one I caught after, I have better memories of because first of all, it was a pretty long cast. It was about an 85-foot cast, and the fly landed somehow close to the fish, and it was a decent fish, about 80 pounds. But what I remember about it is when we've got the fish in, the guide said, "Oh, you jump out! I want to take a photo of you holding it. We're in some shallow flats here, and I want to take a photo of you holding it." And I jumped out and found out I was in 8 foot of water. It wasn't shallow at all.
Oh, wow.
And he's saying, well, push the tarpon up, hold the tarpon above your head. And he didn't realize this thing called displacement. You push 80 pounds up and I go down. I don't go up. The fish doesn't go up, I go down. So I have this hilarious photo of me trying to breathe with my face underwater, trying to hold a tarpon up.
That's amazing. Oh my God.
So
That's a good story.
Yeah,
That's funny.
Yeah, so I remember that one.
So this next question, number 4, is a little broader, but it's just around why do you fly fish? So what is it about fly fishing that keeps you coming back to the river time and time again?
Well, the first one's got to be probably what everybody says, is it gives me a chance to get out from the day-to-day rigmarole of life and get to escape to somewhere that I enjoy being. I like countryside. I like being outside. I like the nature and environment of clean places. So fly fishing takes me to those clean places. So that's the first thing. And I like I am a casting addict. I mean, I absolutely love casting. I'll often, if nothing's happening, I'm just going to be casting. So it's a way of me getting out. I can't do my nice casting on the fields because a lot of the casting involves the space stuff, and so the space stuff's got to have water. So it gets me out to some waters. As I said, they're nice and scenic. It's a beautiful part of the world. It's usually a clean environment. It allows me to get into rhythm, and I get into a zone of casting where I can be out there casting for a couple of hours just flowing, and I like that part. I like that part of just being lost in my skill. I kind of have this feeling that casting. I said this in a video once, and somebody did a video thing on me, and it was a spur of the moment thing when one of these questions popped up, and they said a similar thing. Why do you like casting so much? And I said, well, I like casting because that's the one thing I can control 100%.
Yeah.
Is that I like that ability that I can control the casting. I can't control if a fish eats it. It's there or it's not there. It eats it or it doesn't eat it. I can do things to make that a better chance, but I'm absolutely 100% in control of my casting. And I like that. I like the fact that I'm in control of it. And so I can make myself be better by practicing and casting, and I love that.
Yeah, for sure. So for this fifth and final question of the Mitchie's Fishies 5, what fly pattern represents you best and why?
What fly pattern?
Yeah. This is what we've been asking this one a lot. It's a tough one. There's so many different flies, but I don't know what fly represents you.
What fly would represent me? I don't know. Some just mess that you tied up at the vise, and your kid kind of came in and added a bit of silk to it and said, "Hey, Dad, put that purple feather with that green feather," and everything clashes. Some homemade concoction that's just random and sporadic, I guess. I mean, there isn't a fly. The flies seem to organize and neat to be me.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a great answer. Yeah. And then actually, I kind of want to.
Yeah, maybe.
I kind of want to go back to the second question too, and just ask if you could fish anywhere, any time of year, for anything. What would that be? What choice would you make there?
I would love. Oh God, I don't know. I mean, right now, again, I would pop myself back over to Zambia and fish the Zambezi again for tigers, and there was something very English and decadent about the system they have out there. So you're in a boat and it's 42 degrees outside and you're just flagging and you're hot, and they pull the boat ashore and set up this table with this linen and these comfy chairs, and pour out these gin and tonics that are freezing cold with lots of ice and lime, and you're just sitting in their heat and this lovely smell of Africa and this lovely light, and maybe you've caught a couple of tiger fish, but there's an elephant just walk past there, and you can hear a lion roaring away, and there's hippos on the bank, and there's people watching out for crocodiles. It's just so far different from the regular fishing that I do, even though I take a gin and tonic or a whiskey with me when I'm fishing.
Yeah.
But that was the most far different experience of fishing I can recall having, just because of the danger. I mean, literally, there's elephants and lions and elephants there, and there's hyenas there, and there's crocodiles there, and you can die very easily.
Do you see a lot of crocodile fishing on the Zambezi?
Oh, loads.
You see them pass?
Oh, loads.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
That's amazing.
Loads of crocs, loads of hippos, masses of hippos. hippos are the most nastiest things. Yeah, they're scary.
I have a friend.
You know what was really interesting? I was there with, as I mentioned, I was there with a distributor, and one of his buddies had kind of organized this trip. And they have this cold plunge pool. So you get out, there's 42 degrees of heat, and you come back fishing. You just go into this little plunge pool, and it's probably about 3 meters by 3 meters square of cold water. And it's about 5 feet deep, and you just sit on this ledge and just cool off with another gin and tonic. It's great. But this chap, Dimitri, who was this guy's friend, he was sitting there the last time he went. And while he was sitting in this cold pool, on his phone, an elephant came by and started drinking out of the pool he was just in. And he videos this, and there's this, for me, I would be going, oh my God, I'm going to die. This elephant's going to whip me out by the trunk because I'm in its watering hole and just pull me in half.
Yeah.
And he got this video of this elephant just drinking out of the pool right next to him, the pool he's in. It's like, God's sakes, that's incredible.
Oh my
And then
God.
he just walked away, like nothing happened.
And then the elephant just walked away, yeah.
That's
Yep.
a beautiful story. I would love to witness that.
I think I would poo my pants.
Yeah. Would you not be worried? Yeah,
absolutely.
I would not like to witness that.
Yeah. I would like to witness that if I knew that he was just gonna like drink and walk by.
Yeah.
It's funny because my buddy,
Precisely.
I have a good friend whose parents actually own a lodge on the Zambezi, and he's been trying to invite me over for the longest time to fish for tiger trout. I did the logo for him and everything. I should really get in touch with. Sorry, tigerfish. I said tiger trout.
Good, yeah.
But
Absolutely, you should. What are you waiting for?
exactly, and I think I need to.
This
call
is
him
the
right
first
after
time
this.
I've heard about this friend.
Simon, I've never heard that before.
Yeah.
We've been doing this for 2 years.
That's because I offer these guys so many different friends. You know, I have to
We
I have
gotta
to
go,
surprise
gotta
them
go.
every time.
What's it like catching tigerfish, Simon?
They're really special, spectacular fish. They don't have a long, sustained fight, but they're very, very acrobatic, and they jump 2 to 3 meters up in the air. I mean, when you hit them, obviously you've probably seen the photos of their teeth. They're really aggressive, toothy things. You got to have wire. They live right by the bank structure, so they're a technical fish to catch because you got to land within 4 inches of the bank that you're casting to. Because the fish hug the structure. So there's a technical cast aspect. They hit it hard. As I said, they don't. I didn't get anything over about. I think the biggest one I had was maybe 8 pounds, about 4 kilos, maybe if you're lucky. So I didn't get any beasts out there. But these things are so acrobatic. And they're gorgeous coloring system, and their teeth and their face is just something again, so prehistoric and out of my norm. That it's just everything about that experience added up to one of the most incredible trips I've ever had.
Yeah, that sounds insane. That sounds amazing. They look like an incredible fish.
But as I said, don't expect to have a long sustain. Maybe the big ones do. Maybe these 10-kilo ones, these 20, 25-pound fish do have a harder, longer sustained fight. But certainly the acrobaticness of these things, just ferocious the way they jump around. And I know it's their natural features are these bared teeth, but when they jump out and their teeth are bared and they're looking at you, you think, oh shoot, this thing's like actually is growling at me. It wants to take a chunk out of me.
Oh man, that's amazing. Yeah, no, I've seen pictures of like you fishing lures with just holes in them from these tigerfish.
Yep.
So crazy.
Yep. Yeah, they destroy your flies pretty damn quick.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah. So, speaking of Spey and Southern Ontario, you've come to a couple Spey claves down here on the Grand River, eh?
Yeah.
Are you going to make your way down
Yeah.
again for any other Spey claves or Spey fishing or anything like that?
Yeah. Absolutely. I'm trying to work with our reps over there to try and get to one of the claves. The problem is that they seem to coincide with an event that I'm usually at I think it's usually in May, isn't it? The grand one these days, is that right?
Yeah, sometimes they have one in the fall as well, actually. So I'm not sure.
Oh, maybe
what
it's the
time it is,
fall.
but yeah. Well, when you're down here, we'll have to.
I can't recall.
We'll have to go. We'll have to go Spey fishing, Simon. We'd love to take you out.
Yeah,
Well, of course
that'd
we
be
will.
awesome.
Yeah.
Heck yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on the show, Simon. Honestly, it's been amazing.
Simon, thanks so much.
All right, yeah, no problem. Hey, lads, thanks so much. I appreciate your time.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
All right, Simon. Great to meet you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, cheers now.
Cheers.
Well, we hope everybody enjoyed that show. We certainly had a lot of fun and learned a lot. That's it from me, Mitch, Gab,
Hey, right on, people.
and Yilma.
Yilma here signing off. Don't forget to reach us at the SoFly Crew on Instagram and Facebook. Again, that's at the SoFly Crew. If you have any questions, concerns, or who our next guest should be, please email us at thesoflycrew@gmail.com. Also, we have our website up, sofly.ca. This is Yoma signing off.
And thanks everybody for listening. Peace.